Hey everybody, thanks for listening to Kansas City Business Cast. This is your host, Michael Reisinger. I just wanted to say it's been an awesome first 4 months of this podcast. Thank you to everybody who has been following on the socials, also subscribing on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple, and giving us a rating. Remember, that helps our guests. It helps us come up in the search results, and it's just super helpful for our growth, and most importantly, the growth of our guests and their following. Today, speaking of guests, I have a very special guest. I have the founder of Paws Up KC and 7 Stories Bookstore, Halley Vincent. Welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we met first on Instagram. I found out about your store, and then I started going down the rabbit hole, and I saw, okay, Halley has been interviewed by the news several times. You've been making moves in the Kansas City area for several years now. So we won't go so deep into your origin story because that is so well documented out there. And I know that you're prepared to talk about some other things today on the show. But if you could, just to get listeners who may not be familiar with what you do up to speed in a nutshell, tell us about your nonprofit, your business, and who you are.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Halley Vincent, 14 years old, 9th grade. I'm a freshman at Shawnee Mission North High School. My brand, I guess, kind of encompasses 2 entities, which is unusual, especially at 14. But one is Paws Up KC, my 501c3 organization that benefits local pet adoption agencies and literacy organizations. Paws Up KC's primary fundraising vehicle is a free community bookmobile, which hands out hundreds of used books each year. And then on the other side of the coin is 7 Stories, a retail shop in downtown Shawnee that sells new books, gifts, and art. That's kind of what I'm a little bit more known for at the moment, but they are both kind of, I guess, connected in a way. And I am the youngest bookseller in America. So, yeah.
I didn't know that last part. That is so cool. That is so cool, Halley. And, just for our listeners to know as well, we've already talked about it. Halley there's a lot of information out there on her, but if you have not checked out Paws Up or 7 Stories, definitely get out to 7 Stories. Definitely read the history on Paws Up. I was so inspired getting to know you and seeing, your bio on the site and how you're reading to pets, and your bookmobile is it a riding lawnmower with a trailer?
Yeah. So the bookmobile has evolved in several different ways. Yeah, so it started out as a riding lawnmower, which I did drive around my neighborhood at like 5 a.m. It was crazy. I'm sure my neighbors thought I was like a total weirdo. And then we upgraded to like a little Cushman mini truck. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah. Okay,
that is so cool. And, I took my daughters out to your store one night after school, and, they were just so impressed with the experience. And I think they were just in awe seeing you and your sister, running the store, how knowledgeable you are, the fact that you're stocking local artists and illustrators. Maybe you can tell us about why it's important to shop local, and just kind of talk about the book industry for anybody who's maybe thinking about getting into it.
Sure. I mean, definitely if you're someone who is thinking about, owning a bookstore, I think it's important to know that just because you're a huge reader, that's not a number 1 qualifier. I hate to break it to you, but it's not. I actually, every week on a daily basis, I have people who come into my store and they say, hey, I love reading. It's just my favorite thing in the world and I read all the time. And then they tell me, hey, I also was thinking about owning a bookstore. It's been my lifelong dream. How did you do this? At 14, how is that possible? And first of all, yeah, I don't think reading all the time is a number 1 qualifier. I actually think if you read all the time, you're more suited to be a librarian or to work at somebody else's bookstore, because honestly, running a bookstore, you don't have time to do all kinds of things anymore. Because I did used to read a lot more than I do now. And part of that is just owning a bookstore. But I think the actual number 1 qualifier for owning a bookstore is skills in sales. But more importantly, knowing your community and knowing your neighborhood. I know the character of my neighborhood because it's also where I live and do business. So being able to build relationships with people is really important, and people like to be remembered. So I think that's a pretty big deal. Shopping local, regarding that, people say shop local all the time, but really when most people say that, they're only shopping local during holidays. If you think about it, they're not shopping local all the time, which is what we need more of. You have to be all in, I guess I would say.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you've learned as you have seen the shifts in the industry and with just books? Because I know, like, your space, one of the advantages is you've got controlled amount of stock. You can basically take an at a glance look and you know what's in your store. I also know that you're really good at moving your inventory and selling. So the dynamics of that, what would you say about that, and just kind of like selling and, keeping things in stock and what you're stocking?
Yeah. So something that I've been doing all of this for 6 years. I'm not new to it.
Right.
I started Paws Up KC as a bake sale when I was 8 years old, and I'm 14 now. So it's been a while, but I think I just recognized this. I did something and I didn't even know it was happening. I created a circular economy. And I did that by accident. I didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't know that it was going to happen.
What do you mean by circular economy?
So basically, just like on a micro level, looking at specifically my store, people come to my store, they purchase books, they often read those books and then donate them back to the bookmobile, which then other people come and pick up the books. They leave donations for pet shelters. From then, the pet shelters are getting support. And so it kind of cycles around, and I'm also creating volunteers for pet shelters at the same time. And I think that's something that probably every business needs to have. Like I said, I didn't really recognize this, but just like that cycle is really impactful in being able to, I guess, do that sort of thing. Also, another thing is that 68% of anything that a local business, a small business makes stays in the community. And I think that's very true. We have a UPS driver, and we're really close to really all of our delivery drivers because we see them all the time. And that's something that a big store, you just don't get. Definitely, I've been able to create a lot of really great relationships through everything that I do. I could tell you just about anyone I've ever met. And, but yeah, 68% of that stays in the community. So also, I guess connecting that, us being able to run that cycle, we're also constantly ordering books, and I guess I'm trying to find a good way to connect this, but
no, you're doing great. Yeah. Great explanation.
Yeah. But, I guess going a little further, my nonprofit, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because in my store, we have zero storage. So we have to order all the time, which means that those drivers are constantly having things to do and having places to go. Like today, we have 6 boxes of books being dropped off. Okay. Tomorrow, we have another few. But I think that is definitely showcasing that 68% that stays in the community. Well,
right.
I guess, yeah.
You just mentioned something. Lean process improvement folks like Six Sigma and, folks into eliminating waste in a business and making things efficient, they would love your store because massive inventory is considered waste. Product sitting there, and nobody says it like I've heard you say it. What did you say about big stores? Nobody wants to walk into a book warehouse
And actually, before this, me and my mom like to be really early, so I'm always showing up like hours before. And what me and my mom did before this is we sat in front of Barnes & Noble for like an hour, and we just stared at their store and looked at it. And so, nobody really wants to walk into a Barnes & Noble. I feel like people love the idea of a giant place filled with books, but at the same time, when you go into a giant book warehouse like that, you really only leave with one or two things. Our store, it's tiny. We started with 97 square feet. I now have around 450. So we've definitely kind of expanded a lot and relocated within the last few months. But I think specifically for us, most of the things that we have in our store has been here for 30 days or less. So constantly things are changing. I have people who come back to the store every week because they know that every time they come, there's going to be something else on the shelf for them. And like I said, getting boxes of books in every day. So it is constantly changing. Whereas a big store, there's going to be things, you're going to see the same thing a lot.
Right. Well, what's great about that too is you as the person who's running the ship, you don't have to worry about what's in the back or what's not in the back or what the website said was in stock in the store. And then you have to run around, impatiently. You have a customer waiting. Everything that's there is what people are able to get. So, I mean, there's just a lot of advantages of doing it that way. The connection with Paws Up, how does it work? How is shopping at 7 Stories and being involved in that, how is that helping the work that you're doing with Paws Up KC?
So we do have certain items at 7 Stories that 100% of proceeds benefits Paws Up KC.
Okay.
But I think one of the more impactful things is when I have people that come visit the store, it's often people who have heard about me, who want to meet me and support the store. And a lot of time those are parents with kids who then turn into future volunteers with Paws Up KC. So I think that in a way that is part of that whole circular economy thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know you've got some thoughts too, now that you've been in the nonprofit space. What are some things that you see people doing that doesn't work so well? And what have you learned through your own experience of what works well in, running a nonprofit and specifically for, animal shelters?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is the best way to answer the question, but I definitely have recognized a few things throughout the years. Specifically with Paws Up KC, when I was really little, I kind of recognized that there's a connection between books and pets. I think before I had seen shelters working with a lot of bars and stuff and breweries. And so they do all the time like beer and bar crawls that support pet shelters. But really, if you look at it, there's, if you look at abused and neglected pets, plus adding in like alcohol and all the other things, like it's a part of the problem, but they're also trying to make it a solution, which I think is interesting. But I think that connecting books and pets was really great for me because I'm able to engage other kids. So kids can be involved, but also that means that kind of we're creating future volunteers and future adopters who forever on after that are going to love pets. Right.
As you're talking about the pubs and the bars doing it, you explained what my question was going to be about. Why do you think they choose that? I think when people are thinking about fundraising and getting kids involved, what do you think the opportunities are there? You talked about kids, being attracted to adopting pets and loving to read. But what do you think nonprofits could do a better job of as far as opening up that net for fundraising?
I think in general, nonprofits should be more focused on starting really young because, you can focus on people of an older age, yet at the same time, that's not going to help you for the future. You're just going to have to keep, cycling through and starting and just, I don't know. I think it's more difficult really to do anything as someone gets older. I guess a good example would be learning a language. Learning a language, difficult when you're older, but it's easy to get into the habit of doing something at a younger age. So I think that really any nonprofit, any kind of business should be trying to engage younger people. And I think that's something that I've kind of done, but Yeah,
I think when people so before I interviewed you on this show, I've talked to a couple other guests about how they are, trying to get their kids involved with starting their own business. And I've started to have those conversations with my daughters, but I am I'm late to the entrepreneur, industry life cycle, and I never had a background or training on it. What would you say, kind of two parts to this question, what would you say to parents who are wanting to teach their kids entrepreneurial skills or, get them involved with, creating their own nonprofits? What would you say is important in that journey?
So I think a few secrets to my success would be, one, both of my parents, they went to art school. Every day they showed up ready to critique other people, ready to critique themselves and take criticism. And I think that that's something that doesn't always feel good, but you have to be able to take that and somehow turn it into something, which I think kind of transferred to me at a really young age. I was pretty emotionally mature, I would say. My mom, she tells me all the time about how there's times when I would do things and I would sit in the back seat of the car when I was really, 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 really little. And I would cry because I knew that something that I did, it just wasn't right. Like, I didn't need my mom to tell me. I just kind of knew, and I kind of criticized myself. Second, I think it's okay for parents to step away. And I don't think they always want to, but I mean, even now, my mom, she's not standing here. I mean, you know that. And
shout out to Alicia, by the way. That's your mom, right? Yeah.
And so, yeah. I mean, specifically, like I said, or I don't know if I said this, but Paws Up KC started with a bake sale. And that bake sale, I told my mom, hey, can you sit in the car? Can you just stay in the parking lot? And I'll come out to you when I'm ready. And she did that. And so I think, being able to tell your parents to step away is valuable, or just knowing as a parent that you need to let them be. I think that's a really big thing. I definitely have done some events and left with kind of a weird feeling because there's definitely been times that I've gone to things where I see parents standing behind, for example, like when a TV crew is there, I've seen parents stand behind and signal to their children and make motions and kind of just hover the whole time. And
to make sure the kid acts a certain way in front of the cameras. And gotcha. My
mom, she's never done that. Most of my interviews, actually, I don't think I've had a single interview where my mom has stood there and at all ever told me what to say or made any kind of motions to me. I'm pretty good about setting things up myself, but I think that's important because also generally kids are totally different people when they're not around their parents. Let's be honest.
That's right.
I'm way more shy around my mom sometimes. So
sure.
Yeah.
I know you have met so many adults that are fascinated with what you've done and what you're able to accomplish. What would you say to adults? Okay, there's kind of, just to set the stage here, I just got to tell you, last year there were thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of layoffs in the United States alone. Okay, we've still had a lot of disruption. There's a lot of folks that are trying to get back to work, and I'm seeing this. You and I recently connected on LinkedIn. Thanks for that, by the way. But I'll see people that they're 10 months into their job search and they're not getting offered jobs, and they've got skills that they could create a business out of. Just kind of going off of that, and then the fact that you've met so many adults who are either entrepreneurs or they're not, and they might want to be. What would be advice you'd give to adults that are wanting to build something of their own?
I guess advice for adults: probably asking others for help, because I don't think you always want to. Sometimes you just want to be able to figure it out yourself, but that's not always easy. I guess a few other things. Yeah, asking for help, being able to take advice, but also partnerships. Partnerships are good. Partnering with someone who's a little more experienced in your area. I think for me, specifically with my bookstore, a lot of people see other bookstores as maybe my competition. Like maybe I think they're my competition, but they're not. And I think more than anything, independent bookstores probably have to work together because there's so many other places. And so I think that's the same. That kind of transfers with any area, any kind of business, any kind of nonprofit. I think you have to work sometimes with people who do the same thing as you, just so you can be better.
Right. I love that the other stores are not your competition. Do we have anything like that in Kansas City where we have independent bookstores? Is there like a forum for these folks to network? Like maybe that's a good transition into how you network and how you stay connected and ask for help and give advice and do all those things with other entrepreneurs.
So I have joined a few chambers of commerce. I have plans to join Northeast Johnson County Chamber, hopefully at some point soon.
Awesome. I
am a member of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. And then also for booksellers specifically, I know they have a Midwest Booksellers Association, but then also I'm actually just in the next few weeks going to Winter Institute, which is put on by the American Booksellers Association, which I'm the youngest member of. But I know that those are all really great ways because at the conference that I'm about to go to, they have all these things to network with other people, all these things where you can meet with publishers, which is really great. Right.
That's so cool. What are some things that you like to do? Because I mean, you're very busy. When I see your Instagram live, you're you're at the store, you're also a student. How do you sort of manage your time and your energy? What's your secret? if you have any secrets.
Well, I can be pretty mature on some fronts, but at the same time, I am 14. So
tell me about that. Yeah.
I mean, I sometimes do weird things, but I do like cooking. I like reading. I like hanging out with my little sister. Can't you believe that? And yeah, going to the library. But I actually think that overall, sometimes people ask me, hey, do you actually enjoy what you do? And my answer is always, yeah, I enjoy what I do. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't do it.
That's right.
I have fun spending hours at 7 Stories, even if nobody shows up. I enjoy setting up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday when most kids my age would be sleeping in, to go set up for a farmer's market, sometimes in 100-degree heat, sometimes in the rain. I like getting to talk to people and hearing their stories. Matching the right person with the book is always a good feeling. Branching off, I guess, a little bit from there, going back to I guess I already talked about this, the bookstores and reading being a number 1 qualifier. Don't misunderstand. While I love reading and I have a bookstore and a bookmobile, they're not connected. And yeah, I think more than anything, I guess, like talking about those skills in sales and community, knowing your community, more than anything, I think people visit stores for the experience. There are so many places that you can get these different things. Books, they're not essential. I mean, like a haircut. People usually go get their haircut,
okay,
right?
Yeah, good example.
But,
right.
Like books, you can get them so many other places, and they come to my store for the experience. They know that every time they come, they're going to have a great conversation, that they're going to leave with a really great book recommendation, something they've never heard of, and they know they're going to be remembered. People like to be remembered, and so I think every part of that has authenticity and personality. So I think that, yeah, while I love doing all these other things, I seriously do enjoy what I do. And sometimes, although I have been in a lot of really great media, they don't always showcase that.
Speaking of that, of what media is showcased and what your interviews have covered out there, which again, a search of your name on YouTube will show anybody. What are some other things that you've been, especially in the last year? So you've learned so much, I'm sure, with this new space. What are some other things that aren't really known or about in your journey, and what's ahead for 2024? What are some topics you wanted to bring up? I guess. I
mean, I guess talking about challenges, I have a bunch, and so I've mentioned multiple times that I'm the youngest bookstore owner in America, and while that can be great, it is sometimes annoying because in a lot of ways, people will look at me and they'll go, "Oh, you're the youngest bookseller in America. You're such a cute little business person." and it gets really frustrating, and that's definitely a downfall of being called the youngest of something. There's a lot of things that age makes really difficult, I guess. One of those biggest things is I can't get a business loan like a lot of businesses would. I've never been able to because I'm 14. But
right. And is your mom business partner as well on 7 Stories?
So
okay, so that's important for people to understand.
I can't, on paper, my mom, she owns the bookstore.
Right,
however, it did start as my idea.
Absolutely.
And so it is kind of a family thing, a family event.
Right.
But I think it's a weird balance because either I can be too old or too young. So like joining chambers of commerce is difficult because they don't take me seriously all the time. And
really?
I think...
And you're a member of 3 now in our area.
So I am a member of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. I almost said Amazing American because just a little backstory. Every time I type it into my phone, it autocorrects, which I think is funny. So awesome. I think it should be a thing. If it's not, somebody create it for me.
Right.
I'll join it. But yeah, I am a member of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce and then also the American Booksellers Association. And I do have plans to join a few more.
But they don't take you seriously. What does that look like? And how do you respond to that too?
Yeah, sometimes they don't take me seriously. And I think that has a lot to do with media, actually. While I do have a lot of great media, like I had one story that was carried in, I think, 15 states, like full pages in newspapers in 15 states. And they all missed different things. I mean, as much as I've been featured in the media, none of those necessarily counteract like all of the things people assume about me.
Right.
And yeah, so people sometimes assume that I've only been doing this for a few years, that I actually haven't been doing it that long, that I'm new to it. They assume that, yeah, my parents set it up. And I think one of the biggest ones is that I have a really wealthy family, which is not true. I have a single mom. I'm not even going to lie, kind of our part of Johnson County is definitely a more affordable area, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that one of the things that a lot of news stories have never covered is that how our relocation of 7 stories almost didn't happen. In May of 2023, we had some kind of traumatic things happen in our family, which, again, no media has ever covered. Sure. And by July that year, we knew we were going to have to move. And it almost didn't happen. We almost packed everything up, put it into storage, and didn't have a bookstore. So I think that that's something that people don't really think about or talk about that much. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and I think that's one of the reasons that sometimes people look at it and they're like, oh, running a bookstore must be so great and so easy, but it's not. Something I did want to mention is, I think on one hand, kind of today, we kind of want to raise children, I guess, to think they can be capable of everything, but at the same time, there is like a weird roadblock where it's like, oh, but you can't do it until you're a certain age, which
hit us.
I think that's Halley. Interesting.
Drop it.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fact that I've been doing this for 6 years. I'm kind of zigzagging all over. This is how my brain works.
No, that's how my brain works. You're in good company.
I think that actually, sorry, I'm again going everywhere, but
you're good. You're good.
I think that that's a really great qualifier for being an entrepreneur, doing and starting your own thing, having a brain that's everywhere. It's a crossword, it's a Wordle, it's a Sudoku all in one.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, that's what you love about entrepreneurship. Yeah, is it's a challenge,
constant
it's a puzzle.
Brain puzzle.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to like that idea of people don't think I've been doing this for long. 6 years. It's been 6 years. To put that into perspective, in 2022, in Johnson County alone, 2,093 businesses opened up. And we know that after a year, 20% of those businesses will have closed by then.
Right.
Which I've already outlasted. And the percentage of businesses closing, it doesn't go down. As you go throughout time, more are closing.
Right.
And so that number just gets smaller and smaller. So I guess the idea that that it's a cute project, I think that it's not. I've been doing it for quite a while. So yeah, I'm not an adorable little business person or a well-seasoned entrepreneur, I'll have you know. And yeah, joining a chamber, not a gimmick. It's a strategic move.
Right.
Yeah, I did want to some other challenges, because there's a bunch.
Yeah, just hit them.
Yeah, privilege. That feels like a crazy thing to mention after talking about that, but I've kind of come to this having earned every square inch of space. I'm talking a lot about, I think it can be kind of thought of as I'm talking about just 7 stories, but I think it's kind of all of it. I've come to this having earned every square inch of space by setting up in 100-degree weather, by selling, and sometimes having 0 people show up. And I think every business owner in this any business owner in any kind of area, like no matter their age, I think that they can identify with the feeling of working really hard and then looking online and seeing somebody else in the same area of expertise, just starting off with more financial backing and more square footage.
Right.
The reason I mention this, I'm not envious. I'm not jealous whatsoever, but there are a few new bookstores opening up not far from me, which is great. I think there totally needs to be more of them, and we do need to be working together. So I'm supportive, and I'm excited. I'm going to show up to their grand openings. I'm going to buy things from them. However, not even going to lie, the knife dug kind of deep the day when I opened up Instagram and I saw a post where one of them was getting their first book order of 2 full delivery trucks. To put that into perspective, my first book order was 2 boxes, $150. And that's a dramatic difference, right?
Right.
And again, not jealous, not envious. However, working so hard for years to see someone being able to do that immediately, it kind of punches you in the gut. And I mean, I think it kind of changes. My opinion on this it kind of changes a lot. But I think my biggest problem where I had a small money I had to work with is also my biggest success. And
I've been thinking about that this whole time that you've been talking about that. Yeah.
So, I mean, let's say someone gave me $20,000 tomorrow. There's so many things I could spend it on. I could buy all the books I wanted. And
what would you do? Yeah.
I would buy a bunch of different stuff. I would probably put it towards all these different things. And, afterward, I'd have so many regrets because half of that stuff, my opinion on it would change. And I wouldn't think it's such a great idea anymore. With a tight budget, there was zero room for mistakes. And so I have to exhaustively look through my book orders. I have to be very selective, and I have to work really hard to curate my store. And that's what makes it so personal.
Right.
So, although the 2 delivery trucks, that kind of hurt, I think it's good that I started out the way I did. And so I think that it's not always the best thing to start out with a bunch. Sometimes you have to start on a very small level and then make your way up. I've definitely had to fight for every dollar, every kind of product that goes into my store. So I think that I realized a lot of good things, but I guess through that, I recognized a lot of things.
When you, because I went through a cohort last year, an entrepreneurship cohort. And when you go through these classes in like Johnson County, I interviewed Vince Hayworth from their SBDC. They do be a business owner for a day to give people a real look into it. All the things that you just talked about that you've gone through, and I look at it as the refining fire that's made your business and your nonprofit what it is, and why you're able to have such intention built into your store. These are the things that they try to teach people to do. They try to teach people to bootstrap. Do a lot more with less. What can you do that doesn't cost any money? Case in point example, your posts on Instagram, right? You're able to do that, get the word out there. You are using their platform, and all it costs you is your time to make it. But what you're doing is what they're trying to show people is important in becoming an entrepreneur. And I think, when you talk about the numbers in Johnson County, the businesses, first 1 to 2 years is when most businesses shut down. And what is it, like 90 something % in the first 2 years, because it starts opening up. A lot of that is buying trouble with a lot of debt. They have the vision of what their business should be. So they invest and they give everything. They sign their house away as an asset. And then when it cannot live up to that expectation, it goes under. And with what you've done, I think if you ask every entrepreneur that's had to shut down a business or close their business, there's a lot of things they wish they would have known. And those things, I would argue, are things that you are talking about in the way you've built your business. I think
this is where not being able to get a business loan has also helped me in a way.
Absolutely.
Not being able to access things has 100%. Helped me in a lot of ways. And there's something I was totally going to mention, and it's not coming to me right now.
That's okay. But, if it comes back, you just interrupt me.
Yeah.
Let me know.
All good.
And that's something too. I know that, professionals that finance loans for business owners and stuff, sometimes they say, hey, this loan is not the best thing in your interest. Hey, this SBA loan isn't good. Maybe you should, sell that boat, or, is there any collateral you can, they try to get creative because people think to have a business, I'm going to need capital and I got to fund it. But it's like, they don't think about like, how will we start on day one? Our core values, our vision. And let me ask you about that too. Like, what is your vision for 7 Stories and Paws Up?
I mean, I don't think I necessarily have an idea of where it's going to go. That's kind of been my whole thing since I was 8 years old. I didn't wake up as an 8-year-old and decide I'm going to have a bookstore and I'm going to have a bookmobile and this is how it's going to be.
Right.
It just happened. And actually going through like my whole story, there are so many things that I tried and just didn't work out. And so I just stopped doing them. But I mean, I think that, everything's kind of changed. So I'm not sure where I'm exactly going to go, but I'm sure that it'll be something totally slightly related, but also like, why would I want to do that? Like, it'll probably be something kind of crazy. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned, I think thought of it. You mentioned getting experiences a little bit. And so I think that's where, so I started Paws Up KC before I started 7 Stories. 7 Stories started because I had previous experience giving away free books on a bookmobile for a few years outside at free community events, which has a pretty wide audience, which is great. But I think the important thing about that is not only was I every Saturday at the farmer's market giving away free books and talking to people about what I do, but I was also, even when I couldn't go down to the farmer's market, I was finding ways to gain those experiences and still be there. So I don't know if you know this, but books and rain, not a good idea.
Books and rain?
Books and rain. It's not a good idea.
Right.
So when it rains, I usually cancel and I decide not to be at the farmer's market the day before. Yeah, I still go down to the farmer's market so that way I can still help my neighbors. I could tell you just about anything about all of my farmer's market neighbors, right? I mean,
I love that.
There's teachers, there's, that's one of the things I love about our market. It's just so diverse, which is great.
Yeah. You're talking about the one in Shawnee,
yeah,
right?
in Shawnee. So I do the Shawnee Farmers Market. I have an opportunity to do a few others. So hopefully, maybe that's one of my things. I want to get new bookmobiles. Hopefully like a van or something. And I hopefully 2 of them because I can't be in more than one place.
Have you been to the Lenexa Public Market?
I have not.
Okay. Because I was just thinking like they could really use like a bookmobile. Like, and they use the parking garage as a rain shelter.
One of the skills that I actually think has been really helpful for me, I mentioned needing to have skills in sales to own a bookstore.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Or really anything. But actually, I think one of the things is, so I started with a bake sale, which means I had to count back change. And it was a really weird skill for me to grasp, but that's one of the things I learned from the farmer's market because every time I would go to the farmer's market, if it was raining, I wouldn't do the bookmobile that day, but I would still go down, help my neighbors set up their tents, help them sell their stuff. And often I end up hanging out at my neighbor's tent and helping sell their veggies and all their produce. And one of the things that they like to do is make me second guess like what I'm counting back for change, which I think is so funny. But it's good because but without them they didn't know they were giving me skills that I was going to need. But now there's so many things that I'm pretty good at now that I probably wouldn't have been if I didn't go down to help my neighbors. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I do. Even sometimes like when we have like a slow day at the farmer's market, I go next door. I help my neighbors sell their vegetables. And it's funny because one of the people there at the farmer's market, it's interesting because they always just like volunteer me to go and carry things to people's cars, which I think is so funny. But yeah, it's a fun environment. So you should come visit if you haven't already. We're really great people.
I have not been to the Shawnee one yet, but I will definitely come out. You just again too, you highlighted something that happens when you're hanging out with other people who are running their own businesses or they're selling the produce that they grow on their own land. There's so many lessons that you can collect by being there with people. And I can just picture this situation. Like when you said they make you make you second guess the change, like them just having fun. And it's like an experience. And, they talk about core memories, especially like when we're younger. Like I can think back to memories I had when, I was 5, when I was 7. There's a few in there when 13, and you remember these things and what that does for your development as a person and a professional. I mean, it's huge. I was thinking about something you were saying too, about how the things you're learning. Have you mentored or taught any others? Kids or adults, like just in the ways of running your business or selling. You just seem to me like somebody that would love to be able to share what they've learned with somebody who's willing to try it and do their own thing.
I have not, but I'd like to. I think that definitely. I mean, I guess my generation. It's interesting because obviously we're going to be people out there spending money, but also, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of again kind of lost it all over the place.
That's okay.
But Yeah. I mean, I'd like to do something like that. I think it'd be great. I think that I try to share experiences sometimes when people come visit my store, because often they're like, oh, how'd you do this? And again, it's parents with kids
Right.
who they want to get their kids involved. And so I'm able to generate volunteers from that. But also I feel like being able, I guess, connecting, kind of creating future volunteers and future pet adopters through everything that I do. I'm also kind of helping give people ideas for things that they could, also, I guess, start in a way.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I think a lot of folks are like, if you check out like some of the major influencers, like the Gary V's and the Alex Hormozis, these people that are into teaching people how to build their businesses and stuff. I mean, I think Gary Vee is one of those guys. He says, hey, my kids have a couple choices. If their profession and their dream job requires a college degree, they can go and do that. But if they want to be an entrepreneur, his job, he says, as a parent, is to get them those types of experiences. You mentioned too, your generation. So what do you think is most important for your generation to know right now in terms of business and just in your experience? What would you tell other younger folks what to look out for and consider?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm kind of trying to figure out. But I mean, I think I'm a part of a really growing percentage of what the future looks like. Multi-ethnic people in the world,
Right.
Just like out there all the time. But I think my generation is kind of more likely to start things when they're younger, just because they have more access. And so I actually think when I was really little, I was handed an iPad, right? And through that, I mean, YouTube, right? Like watching YouTube. But a lot of kids, they like to pretend to make YouTube videos. And I found that wasn't just me. But that kind of turned into me being able to do interviews and talking and speaking up about different things. So I call myself a bookstore owner, a philanthropist, but also a activist. And so seeing videos and kind of getting practice, I guess, talking to like non-existent people and making videos of like fake YouTube videos, I think was funny because at a young age, I was able to kind of voice these different things and I guess stand up and kind of talk about things that weren't being talked about, which is great. But also, I guess I mean, one of the things is also when I started Paws Up KC, I was a kid who had allowance, and so throughout the years, I've never really entirely. I guess what's a good way to use that? So I recognize that a lot of kids get allowance, and usually they spend it on something. But what if we just all put our allowance towards something that's going to help someone else? I guess I don't know if that's just how I was raised, but that's kind of what I've done throughout the years. That's kind of a weird little, but yeah. No,
that's really. I mean, and that's something too that's come up in our conversations as well about children being a demographic of people that are very enthusiastic. They've got access to capital in the form of an allowance, or like, it's my birthday coming up. I've had my kids are starting to do this, which makes me well up with tears when I really think about it. But they talk about doing things other than getting the gifts, or they care about experiences. I want to go camping with our friends, our family, or our neighbors down the street, and so there's that idea that they're still enamored with shiny objects. Like, I mean, a lot of us are, but they're thinking about other ways to spend their money. And I think a lot of folks too, like they wish they would have gotten started earlier on, like, saving or investing, in doing those things, being a better steward, I guess, of their resources. So no, that's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, definitely looking back at like my first interviews. So I did a few bake sales, and then eventually, I think it was like the second. So I did a bake sale, and I donated the money to Pet Shelters, the shelter we got our dog from. But my second check is when I was first interviewed. That was my first ever TV interview, and that was with Ray Daniel. And Ray is one of my favorite people ever. And I think it's great because I've actually been interviewed with her by her multiple times. So I think 3 times within the last 6 years. And so
that is so cool.
That's great because she's been able to see that authenticity that sometimes people don't see in a way. And so she's known me for long enough to see me grow in these different ways. And so that's been great. But one of the things that I mentioned in my first ever interview, and it was interesting how I said this, but she asked me what a philanthropist is because I use that word a lot. And I told her, I told her that it means doing something for someone without expecting anything in return. And so, not sure how old I was then. I was 8 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know. That's a wide range. After a while, it feels like all the years kind of blur together, right. Especially doing so many different things. But that was one of the things that I said in my first interview, and I think that stayed. It definitely is still there. I think everything I do started with philanthropy and is still that way. And so that's just, I still even say that in interviews sometimes.
Yeah. And as I'm getting to know you more too in this interview, it feels like that is, no matter what you're doing in the future, philanthropy is going to be a part of it, right? This journey started with philanthropy and you found a way to continue to do that. And you have a business, which, can be a, income generating piece. It can, provide you with the ability to, have the bookstore, and run philanthropical, endeavors. At so many points in this conversation, I'm just thinking about what you've accomplished up to this point. And if you were to talk about, here's the thing. I thought about this on the way here, and you had mentioned it in a previous conversation about documenting success less and failure more. Documenting what you've learned, and then also, have you standardized anything in your processes with the nonprofit or with the business? Are there things that you've learned that you're like, I'm going to do this in a certain way every time because of what I learned from previous mistakes or failures? I know I just asked you like 3 or 4 questions. That's my style. Okay. Every guest has to deal with that on an interview with me. I'll ask like 3 questions in one question, but just on subject of success, failures, lessons that you've learned, anything in that route or that realm.
So, I guess there's a lot of different ways to approach that, but definitely I think while documenting your success is really great. Yeah. Recognizing your failures and trying to figure out what you can do better is more important, because if it's successful, then you're doing something right. But failure, you got to adapt to it, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's I'm all over the place. Can you ask it again? Sorry.
No, that's okay. And to be fair, I asked you like 4 questions. Yeah. So you talked about failure being more important in terms of documenting and what you learn. And what are some, I guess, core lessons that you've gotten from failures? Or maybe you can use some examples of failures that you thought something was going to go a certain way and then it happened a completely different way. And what did you learn from it? Right.
So, let's see here. There's, like I said, a bunch of different ways to approach that.
Right.
I think that, this is slightly off topic, I guess, but one of the things that a lot of places do, you see marketing for all these different events all over the place.
Uh-huh.
I think if you're someone who's planning an event, you can't be too excited that there's going to be a bazillion people that show up, because you know what? You may have one person. You may not have any. It's interesting because one of the things that I did with Paws Up KC, and I'd like to get back to doing, is something I called Operation Tailgate. And that's literally where I would take this trailer and I would park it in front of a business, which agreed to have me there first. And I would sit there and I would collect donations, and I would usually have some kind of goodie bag to give to other people. And sometimes I would get lots of people that showed up, and then other times I wouldn't. But it was still a valuable thing for me because I was still out there and people were seeing it and they were looking around. They were like, what is that thing over there? So just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile, because people are still going to see what you're doing anyway, right? I mean, actually, our first Operation Tailgate, it was on the day when the Chiefs played the Super Bowl. And so we won, but that was interesting. And I know nothing about football, by the way. I clearly like to read more because I don't know anything about sports. And my mom likes to make fun of me on that because it is funny. But yeah, so I mean,
Operation Tailgate. That is so cool. Are you still doing that, or is that something when you get time you do that?
So right now there's a lot of focus definitely being placed on 7 stories. And that's not to say that Paws Up KC isn't important, because it still is. But really, Paws Up KC, I think, does the most work May through October. So I do farmers markets every Saturday, but that is May to October. And so I do a lot of events during that half of the year. And then the other half of the year is me trying to fundraise in other ways, or just, I guess, getting things prepared for the next bookmobile season. So right now what I'm doing is I'm collecting used books. People bring them to me when they're ready to like clear off their shelves, and they donate their books to me. So right now I'm collecting books, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, where's my schedule at? Where am I going to be? And then also, more importantly, trying to upgrade the bookmobile. So I mentioned I do the Shawnee Farmers Market every Saturday, May to October. I do moonlight markets also in Shawnee, third Thursdays, May to October. But last year I was also invited to do a few things in KCK. And my mini truck, it operates under golf cart rules, so I can't drive it all the way out there. I can't drive like a normal car yet. So, and I can't drive a lawnmower to KCK either. That would be a trek. Yeah,
that would definitely be a trek.
I'm sure people would be like, "Gee, who's that person on the riding lawnmower with books in it? That's crazy."
Right.
But yeah, so I did a little bit of things in KCK last year, and most of that actually was me lifting heavy bins of books in and out of the car. And so I'm ready for like a bookmobile upgrade, I guess I would say.
Right.
So really, I've been wanting to do this. I wanted to do this maybe last year. So I guess like a little background info. So I upgraded from the lawnmower to the Cushman mini truck. And then the mini truck was around for a little bit. And then last year, I missed out on a few months of being able to give away free books and being able to do all the things I usually would to collect donations for pet shelters. Right. Because it I don't even know what happened, but it just kind of stopped running for a little bit. And so I'm ready for something that's going to be consistently working and something where I can go more places. And I think that that's going to be way more impactful. Being able, hopefully I would like 2 bookmobiles, actually, because
I was going to be asking you about scaling, like if you've got plans for that.
Yeah, so I've always had the 1, but I would like 2. I'm working on getting 2. And also, if anyone happens to know anyone, please let me know. I've talked to a bunch of people and I'm kind of all over the place, and I'm just kind of like, I don't even know anymore. But yeah, I mean, so the bookmobile, I do the farmers markets in Shawnee, which are on Saturdays, but I've also been invited to do another market. I'm not going to say where quite yet.
Sure.
But that would overlap. And so I do need 2 bookmobiles, and I'd like them to be better functioning and also to have some more space, because I can't usually bring all of the books I have with me, but I'd like to have a larger selection, definitely.
Yeah.
It's funny because I mentioned several times building relationships and knowing your community. And so I think that that's one of the things that I've done pretty well at the Shawnee Farmers Market. So, I mean, we have all kinds of different people. Our audience is kind of different. It kind of ranges. Usually adults that have kids, and, they recognize that reading is kind of the way forward. And I mean, it's kind of all over the place. It's people with with a wide financial gap, I would say. So, I it's just a little bit of everyone that comes and uses the bookmobile to access free books. But I have some people who basically what I do is come to the bookmobile, pick out a free book, leave a donation if you can, and then just come back next time. That's all I ask you to do. Be consistent about it. Come back. Because we like to see you and we're going to remember you. But
Right.
it's funny because I have some people who live nearby and they come and sometimes they show up at the farmer's market before I do. Like I have one guy who he comes to the farmer's market and it's funny because so there's this kind of like apartment-ish building near where the farmer's market is. And so there's this older guy who comes down with his walker on every Saturday. And sometimes he's there before even I am. And let me remind you, I get up at 5 a.m. to be
That's
down
right.
there.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
And often he starts going through my books before I'm even set up.
Wow.
But I think that's really great because I told you how I could pretty much tell you about any person that's ever came into my store.
Right.
And that's a really great example. All the time, every time I do the farmer's market, I show up with a new stack of things that I know he's going to like to read. And they appreciate
so
that.
awesome.
People appreciate you remembering them and remembering what they like to read. And I guess it can be applied to anything. But I find that people at the bookmobile love when they show up and I'm there and I'm like, oh, hey, I have something that I set aside for you that I knew you were going to enjoy. And I think that makes people feel really good. Like I said, people want to be remembered.
Yeah. So there's something you're talking about, and I am so glad to hear. This sounds bad at first, but I'm glad you're getting pressure to go and be in other places because that means people are recognizing what you're doing. And I'm thinking about you. How do you scale your business? I mean, do you have anybody that are you training your sister up to go take over bookmobile number 2? But what are your plans for that? I mean, obviously being invited to multiple places, giving that experience. A lot of business owners too, they go nobody can talk to customers the way I do. And I'm hearing the way, this gentleman looks forward to seeing you at the farmer's market and he's there because you have made an impact on his life. I would imagine if you were adding to your team, you'd want to be much more intentional. But what are your plans for scaling and when you do get that second bookmobile?
Absolutely. So, I mean, definitely my sister, she loves to help. Her biggest claim to fame, I think I told you this before, she is in our online management system as an employee, as a 9-year-old. And she is always at the store. She loves being able to check people out. I guess I would say
she helped us that one time. Yeah, right. My girls were she walked in with Chick-fil-A and then she's like, "What's the password?"
Yeah, and she has her own password that she puts into the system.
And my kids are just like.
And that's right. She processed your sale, didn't she? That was her.
Yeah, she did. She was staring over the counter to fill it out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
it is good. I'm glad that you mentioned that because
so cool.
My view of how she does things is different than other people, and so it's definitely something that she's good at. And sometimes she gets angry because sometimes I try to help her.
Yeah.
She doesn't necessarily want that, which is good because going back to that idea of telling people it's to step back. I think that I've noticed that that's not just telling your parents to step back. That can be anyone. And so I think it's great because she's been able to kind of learn how to do some things on her own. But yeah, I mean, my sister, that's a pretty big claim to fame for her. And so definitely that. But also I mentioned how I've been able to kind of meet people who may be future volunteers at the bookmobile.
Right.
And so that's something I'm working on. Yeah, I mean, there was something else I was going to say, but
on the subject of scalability, adding to your business.
Well, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is Paws Up KC. We don't pay an executive director. We don't pay staff. And one of the reasons we do that is to maximize our impact. And so, while we don't have those things, we are still pretty highly functioning and we try to do our best. At some point, I guess I'm zigzagging all over the place, but 7 stories, we would like to hire an employee at some point. So that's something that I think we're looking forward to, but we're not quite ready for yet.
Right.
I mean, I'm in school. What is that? 5 out of 7 days a week.
Right.
And I guess not today. Yeah. So I'm in school a lot. And so when I'm in school, my mom runs the store, and then basically anytime I can be at the store, I am. But I think we'd like to hire an employee at some point, and we definitely want to make sure that that's someone who isn't just there because they want a job and they want a paycheck.
Right.
It's important to us that's someone who actually really cares about the community, and maybe even lives nearby. Because like I said, I know the character of my neighborhood because this is where I live and this is where I work, and so I think that that's important.
You know, it's amazing because like my background, my professional background, I've got a lot of recruiting experience. And as I hear you talk, I go, when you have a job opening, you're probably going to have at least 5 or 6 people in your mind that you would love to give all jobs because you've been making such meaningful connections. And I mean, you made such a good point as how you've been, you know, people have just been showing natural interest in your nonprofit, and they're like, I want to volunteer or I want to donate. And gosh, whoever employee number 1 is, they're going to be a very fortunate person to join up with you. So we covered the scalability. I'm so glad that you're getting that pull. I call that pull, like, to be at multiple places. With 7 Stories, do you have an online store, or is it all like how does that work? And the types of books you sell there too. And I know you told me like when I was there, if there was something that you didn't have, you could order them. But how does that work? How do you guys sell?
Yeah, so with 7 Stories, like I said, we have boxes of books that come in every single day. We have new things all the time.
Right.
So 40% of our store actually is non-book product. So we have art, we have gifts. I mean, we try to cover just about every genre. And so one of the things I'm actually working on right now is creating a book club, or it's kind of a book club, but also like an advisory council that kind of, I guess, helps me find books for certain categories because I can't be an expert in every kind of book.
Right.
I mentioned reading all the time is not a number 1 qualifier for owning a bookshop. And I think that is 100% true because while I do read, I don't read all the time and I can't read everything, right? Like there's no librarian that's read everything in a library because that would be crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, that's something I'm working on, finding people who are experts in certain categories that can help me to, I guess, make our store more impactful. I mention this sometimes and I did want to mention it now, but our bookstore, as much as it was founded by me so it's founded by me, but on paper, my mom, she owns a bookstore.
Right.
While that is important, while I did start it, more than anything, the idea, going back to community and the people who come and visit my store, more than anything, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like my bookstore. It feels like a community bookstore. It's our bookstore. It's Shawnee's independent bookstore. And I think that's great. I have people who come into the store just to say hi. I have people who come and visit the store to share ideas, to tell me stories just anytime. And so, I mean, even if somebody doesn't come and buy a book, again, I think about the experience. But yeah, going back to kind of all the things we have in our store, most of the stuff in our store, it's constantly changing. So yeah, I am getting stuff in all the time, and I special order stuff as well. So I usually have people who come into the store and it's for the experience again, but they basically just kind of say, okay, I would like this book and I know you don't have it, but could you get it for me? Because even if it might take more time, I am fully invested in shopping local.
That's
and
right.
We talked about this at the beginning, but shopping local, you have to be kind of all in. You can't just shop local around the holidays, so that way you can give someone a local gift. Try to shop local in any way you can. And so I love when people come in and they say, I know I could get this quicker somewhere else, but I want to get this book from you.
That is so cool. Halley, it has been such an honor to have you on the show today. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about before we sign off?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Well, and I tell people this too, but this could be a part one. We can have you back on the show later this year. If there's something that, is happening in your world with Paws Up or 7 Stories, we can always have you back on the show. It's been so cool having you here. Maybe you could just tell our listeners, we'll put your notes in the show notes, your links and stuff, but what's the best way to interact with you right now?
Yep. So 7 Stories and Paws Up KC are on Instagram and Facebook.
Right.
And they are 2 separate pages. So 7 Stories is very book focused, and then Paws Up KC is pets, books, but then also just kind of, I guess, like a little bit of personal as well. So sometimes I post things that aren't related to books or pets. Sometimes it's just me, again, speaking up about things that I've noticed in the community that I think are important that people should know of. So those are really great ways. And then we do have websites for both.
Awesome. Well, Halley Vincent, everybody, you heard it from her. Definitely check out her links. Remember to follow her socials. And if you are in the Kansas City area, get down to 7 Stories. It's an awesome place. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate you. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you so much.